If you're reading this, it means I can no longer hide the truth. Perhaps I'm gone already, or perhaps I am still here, pacing these dim halls, clutching the pen as though the words themselves could anchor me to sanity. You weren't supposed to find this. This letter was meant to burn with me, or rot inside the walls of this house where secrets decay slowly, like roses preserved under glass. And yet you hold it now, don't you? The weight of it, the stain of my trembling hand, the confession I swore I'd never give. Do you believe in love? Not the fragile, passing infatuation that flickers and fades, but the kind of love that brands itself into your skin, a fever that no amount of distance or denial can cure. That's the love I found, the love that consumed me, the love that left me hollowed out and trembling. And if you think love is harmless, if you think devotion is pure, then let me guide you into the shadows where passion and ruin entwine so tightly that you will not know which is which until it's far too late. Loved her. God help me, I still do. Even now, even with the scratches on my arms and the whispers crawling through the dark, I ache for her presence. Her absence is unbearable, but her presence, it is unbearable too. Do you understand that paradox? To crave the very thing that is destroying you, to clutch the knife because its blade is warm from her hand. That is the truth I buried, the truth I denied, the truth I can't escape. I don't ask for your pity. I ask for something far more dangerous, your attention. Because once you let my words inside you, once you allow yourself to linger on the images I will paint, you will carry her too. She has a way of slipping between syllables, of hiding in the spaces between breaths. And when I tell you her name, no, not yet, not yet, you will feel her in the marrow of your bones. That is the curse I offer you. That is the inheritance you chose when your eyes fell on these lines. You think I exaggerate, perhaps. That grief makes a poet of every broken soul. But grief did not teach me this. She did. She, with her eyes that reflected more than candlelight, with her lips that whispered promises sweeter than prayer. She, with her hands that lingered too long, as if memorizing my skin for eternity. She, who told me once in a voice so soft, I barely believed it. I'll never leave you, not even in death. Do you see now why I write? Why I cannot bury this story in silence? Love can kill. It killed me long before death reached for me. It killed the man I was, reshaped me into something I no longer recognize. And if you're still reading, if your breath has slowed the way mine does when I think of her, then perhaps you will understand. Perhaps you'll see why I stayed when I should have run. Perhaps you'll forgive me when you realize what she truly is. But forgiveness will not save you. Not from her. Not from the vow she made. And not from the truth I'm about to tell. It was raining the night I first saw her. Not the soft, cleansing kind of rain, but the kind that drummed against stone and turned the earth into something restless, something that refused to settle. The path that led me to her was broken and slick with moss, a winding trail of half-crumbled stones and iron gates that hung open, as if inviting me into a secret I had no right to claim. I remember thinking, as the lightning split the sky, that perhaps the world itself was warning me away. But even then, some part of me knew. Once I crossed that threshold, I would never leave unchanged. She stood at the edge of the old cemetery, her figure blurred by mist and moonlight, as though she had been carved from the night itself. A single lantern glowed beside her, its light catching in the rain and casting her face into a strange, trembling halo. She looked too fragile to belong in such a place, yet too certain to seem lost. When her eyes met mine, I felt the weight of 100 unspoken stories pressing down on me, urging me forward when every sane part of me wanted to turn away. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice carrying across the distance as if the rain parted just to deliver it. But she smiled when she said it, and that smile unraveled me completely. There was no warmth in the night, and yet I felt a heat rising under my skin, the kind that doesn't come from weather but from something far more dangerous. I approached her as though in a trance. The crunch of gravel beneath my boots sounded too loud, almost intrusive in that still place. She didn't move, didn't retreat. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying me the way a flame studies the moth that dares to drift closer. When I finally stood before her, the scent of roses, impossible in that grave-soaked air, clung faintly to her dress. Her hand brushed mine when she offered me the lantern, and I nearly recoiled from the chill. It wasn't the ordinary coolness of rain-chilled skin. It was something deeper, something that sank into my bones and lingered there, as if her touch carried the memory of frost and shadow. Yet I didn't pull away. That is the madness of it. I craved the cold, needed it, as though it proved she was real and not merely a dream conjured by lightning and loneliness. "Who are you?" I asked, though the words felt clumsy, unworthy of the mystery standing before me. She looked past me, toward the rows of crooked stones and ivy-choked statues that stretched into the night. For a moment, her expression flickered, as if another version of her struggled to surface. "Someone who remembers," she murmured. Then, turning back to me, her smile returned, sharper this time, as if it carried both invitation and warning. The lantern flame sputtered, and for a heartbeat, her shadow broke into pieces on the ground, jagged and shifting. My breath caught. Shadows don't move like that, don't fracture as though they are trying to escape. But when the flame steadied again, her form was whole, graceful, undeniable. I told myself it was a trick of the storm, of my tired eyes, and yet some part of me already knew better. We walked together that night, though I can hardly recall where our feet carried us. What I remember is the cadence of her voice, low and melodic, the kind of sound that burrows under your skin and stays there. She asked nothing of me, and yet I gave her everything in my silence, the tilt of my head, the way I leaned toward her without meaning to, the stolen glances that betrayed my hunger to know her. Every moment pulsed with contradiction. The comfort of her nearness and the dread that something impossible had taken root in my chest. The rain softened at last, but my unease did not. When we reached the gates again, she touched my arm, her fingers lingering just long enough to brand me with that unnatural chill. "You'll come back," she said, not as a question but as a promise. And though I should have resisted, should have let the night end with nothing more than a ghost of memory, I found myself whispering, "Yes." That was the first time I saw her. That was the moment my fate was sealed, though I could not name it then. Love began with her smile, and death began with her touch. The first time she invited me to her home, the rain had not yet dried from our first encounter. It felt less like an invitation and more like an inevitability, as though my footsteps had always been meant to follow hers to that place. The mansion rose from the hillside like a monument to secrets. Its blackened spires pierced the fog. Its windows glowed faintly as if lit from within by restless souls rather than fire. I remember the gates creaking open before she even touched them, as though the house itself was eager to welcome me inside. Crossing the threshold, I was swallowed by silence so thick it pressed against my skin. And yet it was not true silence. There were sounds hidden beneath it, the faintest murmur of whispers, too low to understand, like voices buried deep in the walls. The air smelled of roses, fresh and heady, though the vases that lined the halls held blooms that looked untouched by time. Their petals were impossibly soft, their colors too vivid, as though they had been plucked not from any garden but from a dream. Portraits lined the corridors, faces rendered in oils that seemed more alive than any still image had a right to be. Their eyes followed me. I told myself it was an illusion of light, the way candle flames shifted and bent shadows, but every time I turned away, I could feel their gaze tugging at the back of my neck. She noticed my unease, and when I glanced at her, she only smiled. "They like you," she said softly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The house was vast, and yet it breathed around us as though it were one living organism. Floors sighed under our weight, curtains stirred when no wind touched them. I felt both like an intruder and like I had finally come home. It was madness, the way my heart settled with each step, the way my chest filled with a certainty I could not explain. Her hand brushed mine as we moved down the corridor, and though her touch carried the same unbearable chill as before, I didn't recoil. Instead, I pressed closer. It felt fated, ordained, as if the walls themselves had been waiting for me to walk them beside her. We paused before a great wooden door, bound in iron and carved with symbols I did not recognize. She rested her fingers against it but did not open it. "Not yet," she whispered, her eyes flicking toward me with a look that was both tender and grave. "Every locked door hides a story you'll wish you never heard." Her words lingered, in the air like smoke, sinking into me with a weight I could not shrug off. Still, when she led me away, I followed willingly. We entered a grand hall where a fire burned low in a hearth carved from black stone. Shadows danced along the ceiling, twining like lovers in a secret embrace. She stood in the center of the room, her figure bathed in that strange flickering light, and for a moment I felt certain there had never been a world before this, nor could there be one after. My life had not led me to her. It had begun with her. That night, in the mansion of whispers, with roses that never wilted and portraits that seemed to breathe, I let myself believe that I belonged to her, and worse still, I wanted to. Desire makes fools of us all. I knew it, even as I let her draw me deeper into the labyrinth of her home, into the labyrinth of her arms. Nights in that house were painted in firelight and shadow, every corner soaked with a strange warmth that belonged only to her. She would light the candles one by one, each flame shivering like a secret unveiled, and then take my hand as though the world outside no longer existed. In those moments, I believed it. Her lips tasted of roses and rain. Her kisses were soft but lingering, as if she feared time itself might steal them away. She would pull me close, press her cold body against mine until I forgot the chill, until I believed my warmth alone could keep her tethered to me. And when she whispered my name, low and broken like a prayer she had whispered for centuries, I thought myself the most blessed of men. Yet even in the ecstasy of it, unease licked at the edges of my thoughts. She vanished sometimes suddenly, without explanation. One moment her breath would brush my ear, her fingers tangled in my hair, and the next the bed would be empty, the sheets cooling beside me. I would wander the halls in search of her, guided only by faint whispers that darted into silence whenever I drew near. I remember one night most vividly. I woke to find the sheets beside me damp, not with sweat, not with rain, but with something darker, thicker. When I touched my fingers to it, they came away stained red. My breath caught in my throat, but when she returned moments later, her dress pristine, her smile gentle, I swallowed the questions that threatened to spill from my mouth. She lay beside me as if nothing had happened, her hand sliding over mine, and whispered, "Don't look for what isn't meant for you to find." Still, I could not shake the dread. Even when her touch set my body aflame, even when her laughter melted into my chest like sunlight, there was always a shadow behind it, a voice in my head reminding me that roses have thorns and thorns draw blood. "I don't care what you are," I told her once, as she pressed her lips to the hollow of my throat. "I only care that you're mine." Her smile in that moment was unlike any I had seen, both tender and cruel. "Mine," she echoed. The word heavy, absolute, as though it were not a promise but a sentence. The house itself seemed to approve of our embrace. The walls sighed when we kissed. The candles leaned toward her, stretching their flames as if desperate for her attention. But the same walls whispered too, murmurs threading through the night like silk over stone, voices just beyond comprehension. Sometimes I thought they were urging me closer, deeper into her arms. Other times, I could have sworn they were warning me away. Still, I could not resist her. I would have followed her into the grave had she asked it, and perhaps in some unspoken way, she already had. Her absence was unbearable, her presence unbearable still. Desire is a chain, and I wore it gladly, but dread gnawed at me all the same. That same night, lying in the candle-lit dark, I heard her voice. Not speaking to me, not even near me, but drifting faintly through the corridor. She was whispering, her tone low and intimate, as though confiding in someone she loved. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to catch the words. "I told him," she murmured. "I told him he cannot leave me. Not now, not ever." A pause, then a soft laugh, followed by words that froze my blood. "Just like you." It was in the heart of winter when she told me the truth, though the fire burned high in the hearth and the air should have been warm. We sat together on the velvet chaise in her chamber, the candles casting trembling halos across her face. She looked almost human then, almost fragile, her hands folded in her lap as though she feared they might betray her. I remember the way she hesitated, her lips parting only to close again, her eyes lowering to the floor before finding mine with a sudden, piercing intensity. "I swore," she said, her voice low, threaded with something both tender and dreadful. "I swore I would never leave you. Not even death can take me away." At first, I thought it a lover's declaration, the kind whispered in moments of passion when hearts outpace reason. But the way she held my gaze, the way her fingers tightened on mine until I felt the sting of her nails, told me it was something more, something older, something binding. I laughed then, nervous, foolish, desperate to turn the weight of her words into something lighter. People say things like that when they're in love. "No," she said, and her voice cut through me like a blade. "People make promises they cannot keep. I do not. When I said forever, I meant it." She lifted her wrist, pale and delicate in the candlelight, and I saw the faint scar that circled it like a ring. With trembling hands, she drew mine closer and pressed my palm to the mark. "This is the bond I carry. It is sealed in blood, bound by vow. Not even death can undo it." My throat tightened. I wanted to ask what price she had paid, what ritual she had endured, but the words tangled in my chest. I could only stare at her, caught between awe and terror, between desire and dread. She leaned closer, her lips grazing my ear as she whispered, "Do you understand what it means to be mine?" Her kiss that followed was fierce, almost violent in its intensity, as though she feared I might slip away if she did not anchor me to her. And I let her because I wanted to belong, even if belonging meant surrendering everything I once was. Love had already unmade me. The house itself seemed to pulse with her confession. The portraits glared more sharply. The roses exhaled their scent until it choked me. The fire snapped like a heart beating too quickly. Everything bore witness to her vow, to the change she had revealed and the silence in which I accepted it. But even in my surrender, the questions clawed at me. What price had she paid for such an eternal bond? Who had taught her such a vow, and what had it cost her soul? If she had bound herself forever, then to whom had she first made that promise? I didn't ask then. I couldn't. Her eyes were too bright, her smile too sweet, her hands too desperate as they clung to me. Instead, I pressed my lips to hers and whispered the only words I could find. Forever. The moment I said it, her entire body shivered, as though the vow had wrapped around me too. The night of our wedding came swiftly, as though time itself bent to her will. The chapel lay hidden at the edge of her estate, a ruin half swallowed by ivy and shadows, its bell long silenced, its walls trembling with the memory of prayers no priest should ever have spoken. Yet within, it was dressed for ceremony, though not the kind the living would recognize. The roses lining the aisle were black as ash, their petals crumbling softly in the draught as if they'd burned long ago but refused to turn to dust. The air smelled not of blossoms, but of iron and rain. Candles flared along the pews, their flames long and thin, flickering as though reluctant to burn. And then there were the guests, silent figures draped in dark attire, faces blurred by candlelight, their stillness uncanny. They did not speak. They did not breathe. Their eyes, if they had any, gleamed like wet stone. I walked toward her, and she stood waiting in a gown the color of snowfall at midnight, pure yet shadowed, beautiful yet impossibly sorrowful. The veil clung to her as though afraid to let her go. When her eyes found mine, I forgot to fear. She was radiant, the kind of radiance that kills you even as it saves you. The efficient, or the thing that wore the shape of one, spoke in a voice that seemed to echo from beneath the floorboards. Words older than scripture, older than the church itself, rolled through the chapel. I scarcely understood them, but I felt their weight, their binding power pressing against my chest. Finally, the question came. "Do you take me?" she whispered, her lips trembling but her gaze steady. I should have paused. I should have asked what it meant, what fate awaited me if I said yes. But love is a cruel master, and her beauty was a knife I had already pressed against my throat. "Even if it kills me," I said. The moment the words left my lips, the candles flared so brightly that the shadows fled, and for an instant, I saw the truth of our witnesses. Some were no more than husks, suits filled with dust, bones clothed in forgotten finery. Others were less than human, faces stretched too thin, mouths filled with teeth not made for prayer. Yet they bowed their heads as though in reverence, as though satisfied that another had joined their ranks. Her smile broke then, fragile and luminous, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Not warm tears, but cold, glistening drops that chilled my skin when she touched me. "You are mine," she breathed, "and I am yours. Forever." The vows ended. The officiant closed its book with a sound like stone grinding, and then the guests vanished. One by one, without movement or sound, they flickered out of existence, leaving behind only the smell of dust and decay. The roses along the aisle withered in an instant, curling into brittle husks. I turned toward the doors, but they had sealed themselves shut. The wood fused as though grown together by some unseen hand. I tried to push, to pull, to break free, but the chapel was no longer a place. It was a cage, and we were its heart. She only watched me, her eyes shining with sorrow and devotion. "There is no leaving now," she said softly, as though it were the gentlest truth. "We are bound. Forever." And in the silence that followed, I realized that forever had already begun. The vows were spoken, the doors sealed, and yet for a few hours I convinced myself I had gained paradise. She was mine, and I was hers, our lips pressed together beneath a ceiling that moaned with ancient timbers. That night, we lay in the bridal chamber, wrapped in silks that smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Her skin pressed against mine, cool as porcelain, and though her touch thrilled me, it also carried a weight, as though every caress was a chain tightening around my body. It was not long before the shadows began to stir. At first, I thought it, the tricks of sleeplessness, the delirium of passion and fear combined. But when I closed my eyes, I felt them, hands resting against my chest, not hers, but countless, unseen, feather-light yet suffocating. They whispered my name, syllables stretched thin, as if my soul were being rehearsed for departure. I would bolt upright, gasping, only to find her watching me, always watching. She smiled when I asked if she had heard them. "They only come because they are jealous," she said, brushing my hair back as though I were a frightened child. "You belong to me now, and they will never touch you." But her reassurance did not comfort me, for every glance of hers felt like a claim. Every kiss seemed to devour rather than to give. If I turned from her for even a moment, I felt her presence swell behind me, vast, endless, suffocating. She clung to me in silence, her eyes heavy with devotion, and I began to realize that love, when twisted into obsession, is not tenderness but terror. Nights stretched on like a fever dream. I would wake to find her standing over me, her lips close to my ear, whispering words not meant for the living. Sometimes she would call me by name, other times by names I did not know, as though my identity itself blurred with ghosts of lovers past. And if I pretended sleep, her breath would linger, cold and damp, until I shivered awake in surrender. One evening, unable to bear her unblinking gaze, I wandered the halls of the mansion while she slept, or pretended to. The corridors seemed longer. Then I remembered, their portraits bending in perspective, their eyes gleaming faintly in the dark. I felt them watching, all of them, as though they knew a truth I had yet to uncover. Drawn by something I could not explain, I entered her chamber. I had never opened her drawers before. It felt wrong, But the compulsion was stronger than guilt. Inside, beneath silks and withered lace, I found a ring, gold dulled with time, its surface etched with words nearly worn away. I turned it toward Umai, the light, and froze. It was a wedding band, not mine. And the name carved into its curve was not mine either. I held the ring in my hand until my fingers trembled. Its weight was heavier than gold should be, as if grief and betrayal had melted into its very metal. I wanted to believe it belonged to a forgotten ancestor, some relic from the past. But deep inside, I already knew. It had been worn. It had been cherished. And it had been hidden. When I asked her about it, she did not deny it. She only tilted her head, her long dark hair falling like a veil between us. And for the first time, her eyes looked older than eternity itself. He vanished. She whispered, her voice as brittle as cracked glass. Like they all do. They swear their devotion, they swear eternity, but when eternity comes, they grow afraid. Who was he? I asked. The words burned my throat. She smiled then, a slow, sorrowful curl of her lips. He was mine, just as you are mine. But he didn't stay. None of them do. I wanted to leave it there, to close the drawer, to shove the ring back into the shadows. But her words rattled through my mind, sharper than any blade. None of them do. That night I pressed further. What do you mean, none of them? Heard you? Face grew strangely radiant in the candlelight, as though the fire adored her enough to worship her skin. She drew closer, slipping her fingers along my jaw with aching tenderness. You're not my first, she murmured, but you will be my last, because you swore. Do you remember? You said even if it kills you. Her touch lingered at my throat, not cruel, but possessive, like a ribbon tying me shut. I tried to laugh, to dismiss her words as the dramatic poetry she so often spoke. But something inside me had shifted. A shadow of suspicion coiled in my chest, whispering that her love was not a gift, but a sentence. Days blurred. I began hearing them more often, the others. Whispers in the halls, footsteps pacing behind locked doors. At times I caught faint reflections in the mansion's tall windows. Figures standing close beside me, men with hollow eyes, reaching toward me as if to warn me, as if to claim me. One evening I asked her plainly, where are they now, the ones before me? Her eyes glistened with something between fury and heartbreak. They left me, she said, her voice cracking. But you promised never to leave. It was then I understood. She hadn't merely loved them. She had bound them. Their voices were not whispers of strangers, but remnants of lovers, tethered to the house as tightly as the ivy strangling its stone walls. And now, I was one of them. The thought hollowed me, left me gasping for air that seemed thinner with every breath. My promise had not been words but chains, and each night she drew them tighter. I began to wonder, was I already vanishing? Was my name being erased from the world beyond these walls? Or was I destined to remain here? Another echo, another pair of eyes staring from the portraits, another hand reaching for whoever came next. She kissed me then, softly, reverently. Don't be afraid, she whispered against my lips. They couldn't keep their vows. But you will. You'll stay. Alive or dead, it doesn't matter. You'll stay. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't asking. She was telling me. At first, I told myself it was love. That the way she lingered behind every door, the way her presence pressed against me, even in silence, was proof of her devotion. But devotion has a flavor, and this one was bitter, metallic, like blood held too long on the tongue. She was everywhere. In the mirrors, her reflection moved before I did, her gaze always fixed on me, even when my own face stared back hollow and pale. In sleep, she crawled into my mind, her voice curling through my thoughts like smoke through a locked room. Mine, she would whisper. Mine, even if the world forgets you. There were moments when I almost surrendered willingly. She would stroke my hair with infinite tenderness, humming lullabies I swore I'd never heard. yet felt etched into my marrow. Her lips against my forehead felt like absolution, and for a fragile instant I believed in forever. But then her nails grazed too deep, drawing thin lines of blood along my skin. She'd smile as she kissed them away, her mouth red, as if pain were the proof of love she craved. I tried to escape her gaze, to flee into the farthest corners of the mansion, but even the house obeyed her hunger. Doors that once opened with ease grew stubborn. Halls curved back on themselves. Windows showed not the world beyond, but endless corridors of flickering candlelight. I began to feel the walls breathing with me, the floor pulsing faintly beneath my feet, as though the estate itself was a body, and I, a vein caught inside it. One night I forced myself to the gate, driven by desperation that felt half dream, half madness. I told myself if I could step beyond the iron bars, I might still be free. But the moment I pressed a trembling hand against them, my chest convulsed. My breath locked, my heart thrashed, and I fell to my knees. She appeared then, silent, standing just inside the threshold. Her eyes were luminous with sorrow and triumph. "You can't," she whispered, not angrily, not cruelly, just with certainty. "You're bound. You're part of me now, part of us." Her words carved themselves deeper than any wound because, even as I knelt there, gasping for air that wouldn't come, I felt the truth bloom inside me. My veins no longer carried only blood. They carried her, the house, the whispers. When I staggered back inside, defeated, I saw my reflection in the tall, dust-laden glass of the entry hall. For a heartbeat, I did not recognize myself. My eyes were darker, my skin pale as her own, and behind me, though no one stood there, I saw her hand resting on my shoulder, and in that instant, I knew I could never leave. It was late, though in this house the hours blur into one another, and time feels less like a river than a pool of stagnant water. She sat beside me in the chamber where the walls never slept, her face haloed by candlelight that seemed to bend toward her, as if the flame itself adored her presence. Her hands folded around mine with such tenderness that, for a fleeting instant, I believed she might release me, but then she spoke. "The vow," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was never meant to be gentle. Do you understand? One must die so the other may stay. That is the way it has always been. That is the price of eternity." I stared at her, feeling the words seep through my skin like poison. "You never told me that," I said. My voice sounded foreign to me, weak, thinned out like smoke. She pressed my hand to her chest, and I felt no heartbeat beneath the silk of her gown. "You said forever," she murmured, her eyes wide, pleading, desperate. "Forever is longer than you think. Longer than your body, longer than your breath. And I won't lose you." Her lips trembled as she kissed me, and I almost pitied her, almost believed her devotion was pure. But her tears burned cold against my cheek, and the truth dripped between her words like venom. She hadn't stumbled into this curse. She had embraced it, nurtured it, used it. Every vow before mine had ended in silence. Every lover before me had vanished, not by chance, by design. My heart pounded as though it already sensed its end. "So you would kill me," I whispered, not as a question, but as a realization. Her arms tightened around me, clinging with the desperation of a drowning. "Soul, no," she said, shaking her head furiously. "Not kill, keep. There's a difference." But the difference was nothing more than a veil of words. Death, here, was not an ending. It was a binding. I tried to rise, to pull away from her embrace, but my body felt heavy, sluggish, as though the air itself had thickened. Her voice followed me, breaking, tender, relentless. "Don't leave me. Please. Even if it kills you. Please." The way she begged did not sound like love. It sounded like hunger, and I knew then that my fate had been sealed the moment I whispered, "My vow." She had never planned a life with me. She had planned a death, my death, woven into hers, so tightly there was no way to tell them apart. And as I write this now, I feel the lines between living and not living blur beneath my fingers. My Hands tremble, colder than they should be. Perhaps this is my last confession as a man of flesh and breath. Perhaps the next time these words are read, they will already belong to a ghost. It happened the way dreams do, slowly at first, then all at once, until I couldn't tell if I had woken into nightmare or slipped further into it. She held me as though I were fragile glass, her lips pressed to mine, and though I struggled, though I gasped for air, her embrace only tightened. It was not malice that fueled her grip. It was devotion. That was the horror of it. I felt the ground yield beneath me, though no spade had turned the earth. The floorboards, the stone, the soil, all softened, pulling me down as though the house itself conspired in her vow. She cradled me, whispering lullabies as cold earth rose around us. I clawed, I begged, I thrashed against her silken arms, but her kisses silenced me. Each one stole more breath, until breath itself became an afterthought. The soil pressed against my chest, damp and suffocating. Yet she smiled, her hair spilling over me like a funeral shroud, her eyes burning with a love that felt endless, merciless. Forever, she whispered, her voice filling my ears even as dirt filled my mouth. Forever, my love. You promised. My lungs convulsed, my vision fractured. And still, she would not let go. To her, this was not death. It was a wedding bed. An eternal honeymoon. She rocked me gently as the last light vanished above, her kiss sealing the soil, her song burying me deeper than stone. And now, as I scratch these words into the page, I can no longer tell if this hand belongs to the living. The ink runs pale, as though even it remembers me less with every stroke. Perhaps you are not hearing the words of a man at all, but the echo of one who stayed too long. She said she'd never leave, and she never did.